I'm glad you're here. We took your emails. I know. Yeah, we did. I'm thinking, okay.
You okay with that? Any opposed?
Good thing you showed.
Will you run home with the kids?
Oh, yeah. Here.
You got like special eating. Wow, really good.
Look at how it's Jay's high five.
I like that.
It was better than the morning for Carrot, yeah. So I went working after you guys got in there. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have cell phones, would you please either silence them or turn them off out of courtesy to the speakers? And just a couple of things, food for thought. There is not an agenda for this evening, so it is just going to be an open mic type town hall forum. So if you have issues that you're going to be bringing before the board, what we are going to ask is that you come to the microphone, and we are digitally recording this. The newspaper is doing their own thing over there, and I believe, are you streaming this live?
I think so.
Hope so.
I'm trying to get confirmation.
So if you have friends or family at home that could come and you want them to watch it, text or call them right now and say Tetonvalleynews.net, and there's a little screen up in their upper right-hand corner.
What's the final score is on?
finish or anything.
Big screen.
Unless we can screen it.
That's all right. Well, I think with that said, I'd like to welcome everybody out to our first town hall meeting. This is exciting. It's breaking new ground, and I think this is really going to turn into be a good thing. I don't know how much we're going to be able to interject in any of this, but we got to be careful what we do, so that we don't break our open or our meeting laws or whatever. So, how many people are wanting to speak tonight? So we have an idea how, because we usually do 10 minutes, a piece per person, but we're going to go from 7 o'clock to 8:30, and then that'll be the end. So we got to show of hands of people that are going to want to speak tonight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What if I have 10?
We don't have to commit, do we?
No, I just kind of trying to make sure, I give everybody, fair chance,
I'm sure, yeah.
want to speak. But with that said, I guess let's get this ball rolling, and who would like to be first? Who would like to start? Oh.
Sue Pastor Victor. I just thought of a super general question that might help everybody else direct their other questions, but I'm curious to hear from each of you what your top 2 or 3 priorities for implementing the comprehensive plan are, or maybe you want to answer as a group. Maybe you've already figured out what, as a group, kind of the first few things that you want to start working on.
Well, me, myself, I want the roads, to be improved, and multiple use trailheads. I think that's very big. Now, I don't know what Kathy and Sid, that's 2 priorities of mine.
I think it's hard to say for me right now because I know Kelly voted for the comp plan, but I know Sid is not in agreement with it, so it's hard to say, and maybe I'm speaking for you, Sid, but that's certainly what you shared with me. It's hard to say if there are going to be amendments to the comp plan. It's hard now to say what is going to be implemented in it.
I think there's been, I think there's been some legislation that will change the comp plan, that has to change the comp plan a little bit. I think there will be some amendments to it just because of some of the state legislation that's gone on recently. Having to do with overlays and things like that. As far as implementing, I don't know. I mean, we Code Studios, I think, was supposed to be here in March sometime. They haven't. They're backed up to. I think they're coming in next week. It'd be interesting to see, the process that they are wanting to take. We're going to sit down with them and give them input on the direction. As far as, I think there are some ordinances that, land use ordinances that we're going to be looking at, and I think land use is obviously going to be a hot topic over the next little while. Did that answer?
Does that help?
So it's still like super vague right now for everybody, I think.
Yeah, and it's like the implementation is going to be, when we get the final drafts and stuff, it'll be nice to see what all our committees come up with, so that we can start following them. I think everybody's thought process out there is worried about, going back to the old ways, and I can't ever see that ever happening again because of.
Well, and I think think a question would be, do you believe that the comp plan, the newly adopted comp plan, is a good reflection of the desires of this community? And I do believe that it is, but I think, I don't know if my fellow commissioners feel that way. So if that's not the case, if the board doesn't agree that is the vision, it's hard to implement it if there's disagreement on the board if that's the vision or not. And if that's not a shared vision on the board, we're kind of stuck in place.
Scott?
I think I'm just going to ask Kathy's question. Does the board feel that the comp plan
Your name?
reflects, my name is Scott Fitzgerald from Victor. Does the board feel the comp plan reflects the shared values and visions of the community?
Yeah.
I do, until I see what the final draft is of it, I'm not sure what is, we still have to get the final part of that.
No, that was the vote that you bought and I did at the high school.
All right.
That was the final draft that we voted to approve the comp plan.
I think there, I don't think it's any, I think there was some pressing of the comp plan being moved forward with, I'm not sure, I'm positive everybody wasn't listened to. I mean, generally, no, I think there is a lot of, of opinions that are out there that don't think they got listened to in the comp plan process. I was at a couple of the public meetings where, the majority of the people that were there were speaking, against what ended up in the comp plan, and, they feel like they weren't listened to, that there was a direction that was wanting to be, moved with that, and, it was kind of rammed through, pretty quick. People feel like it was rammed through before, it was right there where we were leading up to the election, right in the midst of the election time, and I think, people feel like it was rammed through for a reason. So, to answer it, I think there are a lot of differing opinions that people feel like they weren't heard during the comp plan process.
Can I make a comment to this? I'm Jackie Riley of Drake's, and I don't follow politics completely. Hasn't this comp plan been going on for a really long time? And we've had, things that lasted till 3 in the morning, and, it sounds like we're going back to square one, and nothing's going to ever happen. And am I wrong on that, or?
It's not going to go back to square one, but I think there, I can't speak for the board, but in my view, there probably will be, with some of the legislation that's going on in Boise, they talked about limiting the land use, the local land use planning act, and
yeah, those bills died. Davis's bills did pass, Davis's bills passed, but it actually added some more clarity on overlays, which I think would help counties. Like those ones from Kootenai County that died. I think
I'm aware of what the Davis bill did, and I just think, that gives you.
It didn't cut the blue button, no.
What?
Davis's bill didn't cut the blue button.
Okay.
Well, the one that passed, right? The one that passed, as I read it.
Hi, I'm Sherry Hill, and I get really scared, so I might not look at you. It happens. Anyway, yeah. Anyways, the comp plan has passed, but the implementation of it is where you need to take your time. We've got a comp plan, we need to make it work. But you need to fine tune it now, because there's no going backwards. And honestly, you three fighting in the newspaper, it's getting old. I understand that the shift of power has changed. I understand that. And I respect all three of you very much. You have a very hard job in this county, taking care of all of us. But you need to learn to give and take. That's how the comp plan is going to survive. If we don't give and take, then it's not going to survive. And we're going to be a stalemate until something gets voted out. That's fact. Okay? I think a real serious issue, though, that has come to mind, and I wrote a letter about this in the paper. We have voted Sheriff Lyford in. Now we need to support this man. You are fighting between the Sheriff's Office and the Prosecutor's Office since Lindsay Moss came on board. This needs to be addressed. The way Lindsay got his job needs to be addressed. You let someone go and fund the planning thing. Well, now it's all come to light, well, there needs to be a notice in the paper. You've got to hire so many people. When Lindsay Moss was hired, there was no notice in the paper. No other applicants were looked at. He is an investigator for the prosecuting attorney's office. It is all in the VOCC's minutes. It's there. I researched it. Everything I'm saying is true. There's a problem since he's come on board. Now then, we've had a string of burglaries going on. I understand comp plan's important, but I also understand people's safety is important. And our sheriff's office can't get warrants. They can't get things because somebody's dropping the ball. And I pay taxes, and I pay a hell of a lot of them, and I'm getting upset. You guys want to fight? That's great. You fight. But let's address the sheriff's office. Let's give him back his investigative hours, and let's give him some support. We, the people, voted for him. We voted him in, and we have spoken. So I think you need to, in my opinion, not telling you what to do. You are adults. God damn it, I'm getting angry. If my house gets burglarized, I guarantee you I'm going to shoot whoever it is. You know, I ain't going to put foot around. I'm tired of this. Our sheriff's department needs its support. It needs its investigative hours back. And if Lindsay's the problem, I'm not saying he is. Personality conflicts, we all have them. But it just is really strange that we're having all these problems since he's come on board. I think you really need to address that. Because we need to feel safe in this valley. You want people to come here? Great. Let them come here. But if we're going to be burglarized, and then those people are going to be let off because our two departments can't talk and can't work together, who's going to want to live here? I mean, I don't even feel safe in my own home anymore. Come on. You got these burglars, and we can't get warrants for them? Seriously. And why is the paper writing about everything you three talk about? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you need to have more executive sessions. I don't know. All I'm saying, I'm really concerned. I'm really concerned. You know, what's good is good for the goose is good for the gander. If Sid has someone in mind that he wants to hire, well, the same hiring process should be put full board. That's all I'm saying. You know? And I want you all three to know that I'm really proud of you. And I support all three of you. Try to get along.
If there's a chair next to you, would you raise your hand so that some of these folks can try and find a seat, please?
I'll get up there with time. Hey, the newspapers always love a good controversy. If they can make, Tony, go, county, and if they can turn it into a fight, you can't fight, they'll do all they can to sell some readership. But I don't disagree with you, Sherry. The remarks I'm going to make here, I don't mean to sound parochial. A lot of people probably heard the first half of what I have to say here. And for those who haven't heard it, might be a little bit of an enlightenment. And I'm not meaning to stir up controversy here, but this is how I feel. In 1887, Alexander Tyler, a Scottish history professor at the University of Edinburgh, had this to say about the fall of the Athenian Republic some 2,000 years prior. A democracy is always temporary in nature. It simply cannot exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy will continue to exist up until the time that voters discover that they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates who promise the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that every democracy will finally collapse over loose fiscal policy, which is always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations from the beginning of history has always been about 200 years. During these 200 years, these nations have always progressed through the following sequence: from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, and from dependence back into bondage. Professor Joseph Olson of Hamline University School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota, points out some interesting facts concerning the last presidential election. Number of states won by Obama, 19. Number of states won by Romney, 29. Square miles of land won by Obama, 580,000. Romney, 2,427,000. Population of counties won by Obama, 127 million. Romney, 143 million. Murder rate per 100,000 residents in counties won by Obama, 13.2. Counties won by Romney, 2.1. Professor Olson adds, in aggregate, the map of the territory Romney won was mostly the land owned by tax-paying citizens of the country. Obama territory mostly encompassed those citizens living in low-income tenements and living off various forms of government welfare. Now here's where we get to some relevance here. Not to disparage the residents of our county who are suffering a tough time, I believe Teton County is in the same ballpark, as evidenced in the close results of last November's local election. We elected 2 of you commissioners and hoped that you would be able to turn things around respecting our economy. Many low-information voters can't understand what is happening at the national level with respect to our economy impacts and how that impacts our local economy, especially in the real estate market. In addition, an increase in payroll taxes, hidden inflation, look at the price of the gas pump and food costs, and the economic effects of Obamacare are making it most difficult to attract business investors, let alone keeping folks from moving out. I don't believe for a minute that an overabundance of real estate lots are the reason our local economy is failing, nor that development in the scenic corridor prevents investors from desiring to move in. What prohibits others from being attracted to our county are the burdensome regulations, fees, and uncertainty of what further restrictions might be imposed on investors as a comprehensive plan is implemented. Not to say that good planning isn't needed, but the minority that is comprised of progressive, anti-growth, EPA-obsessed, feel-good sustainabilists are making your job of turning things around all but impossible. Again, look at what the newspapers are printing. Don't let the turkeys get you down. You have the support of the majority of the landowners and taxpayers in this county. I dare say we run the risk during the next election cycle that a liberal preponderance could very well vote for the candidates who promise the most benefits from the county comprehensive plan, with the result that even our own local economy will finally fail because of the policies being forced upon us by progressive extremism. Thanks for the job.
Hold on, Tony. I got a couple of questions for you. What do you think caused the economic downturn in Teton County?
It all started with TARP. We have to look at what's happened at the national level. the toxic asset relief program that really turned all the investors off, and then all the bailout monies that were going to these feel-good alternate energy programs that took monies away from investors and gave the money to the banks that's falsely propping up the stock market right now.
Didn't talk happen after the economy started to slow down quite a bit? So
well, the economy started slowing down at the end of Bush's term, and then you remember Bush saying, hey, we have to abandon free market principles to save the free market. Well, I don't agree with that, but that's what really took us on this nosedive down. And now nobody knows what the heck to expect, so nobody's investing any money. And unless there's attractors to bring people to counties like Teton County, incentives, less restrictions, tax relief, that sort of thing, we're not going to see those people come to this county. And people who come here for tourism, we depend a lot on tourism, they've stopped coming here for the most part. That's taken a nosedive because they're holding on to their money because they don't know what the heck to do, especially with the businesses, the business climate. People stop hiring because they know that they're going to take it in the shorts over Obamacare.
You know, sales tax numbers and rates have been going up. Did you know that? Sales tax numbers and rates have gone up.
Well, that's great, but who have we seen move in here lately, except for maybe 3 businesses, to include the vodka distillery that got cranked up last year. You know, we see restaurants, you know, starting and failing, but we don't see, you know, what we're looking for in the comp plan, light industry. Don't see that coming here.
What do you think drives the economy in Teton Valley?
Tourism is pretty much half of it. The building industry is the other half, but you know that's gone by the wayside. And speaking of that, you know, how many building permits have we seen during the past 12 months? 2 or 3? And we're all arguing over a planner when we're not doing any building at all.
Well, so a business like City Pass in Victor, which is one kind of you described, they employ probably 30, 40 employees. Why do you think a business like City Pass would move here?
Because there's a lot of commuting going to Jackson Hole.
So they're based in Victor, so they don't have to commute over the whole. They could have located in Jackson. Why do you think that they would locate in Teton Valley? What would attract a business like City Pass to be here?
Well, I don't want to talk out of my hat because I haven't done the research on them. You know, perhaps you've given them an incentive, have you?
Nope.
Okay. Perhaps the cost of living is a lot less over here. And, you know, that's great. You know, there's a lot of people that live over here that work in Jackson because the cost of living is less over here. I mean, that's a big attractor, a cost of living. But, you know, for City Pass folks, taking a stab at running a business, that's great. But they don't support just the people in Victor.
So cost of living being one, do you think there's any other reason they would locate in Teton Valley? I mean, cost of living is a lot cheaper.
Well, anybody that's in business is in business to make a profit.
Sure.
And if they can make a profit here, that's great. And that's what we have to incentivize, you know, profit. In order to attract businesses here, we have to make it less of a burden for them to start it up. You know, all these impact fees and studies, etc., for building, they need relief from that. But again, we have to recognize what's happened at the national level and what flows down to us. I'm not putting the blame on the past or the present policies of the Commissioner of P&Z because it's flowing down and we're suffering from that, as all nations are. You know, Teton County isn't unique in what's going on, but we cannot continue to blame a new administration. We have to be cognizant of what investors think when they go through their decision-making process about where they want to locate.
And I would encourage you to call Mike Morey, who is the co-CEO of City Pass, and ask him why he located this business in Teton Valley.
Do you know why? Why don't you tell us all?
You were on the Economic Development Subcommittee. It's all in that draft. Even his value statement is in there. Cost of living is one.
Mm-hmm. What's the other?
I think you should know that,
Oh,
Tony. You
yeah.
were on that committee.
Yeah, I was, but, you know,
I think you-
I did make every meeting.
Right.
But, you know, I'll read it, sure, I'd love to know what the
The other
truth
ones are
is there.
community character,
Mm-hmm,
right, having that small town community,
mm-hmm,
access to recreation, natural resources, clean water, clean air.
mm-hmm.
He could have easily located anywhere that would have been a lot cheaper.
Sure,
And he's
but
very
he
clear.
obviously saw the potential for making a profit here.
And he is.
Yeah, well, that's great.
That's right. And I think
And-
those are assets that we should probably try to protect if we're going to encourage investment.
Oh, yeah, we want to allow everybody to make a profit here. We want to make it easy for them to start up their businesses. But my focus here is on what are we focusing on? Maybe, well, what are we focusing on that perhaps we should be looking in another direction? When we need to be cognizant of the comp plan, we need to pay attention to how we implement that so we can continue to attract the kind of people like City
Absolutely.
does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, thanks.
Somebody else?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Margo, the other half. I just want to say, I was planning on opening a business if Romney was elected because I felt like taxes and these ridiculous $6,000 studies that we have to have done before we can open a business. And consequently, my business went right down the tubes. And it was, you know, it wasn't any big, super huge business. It was a fabric store, quilt shop. But feasibility studies for that's ridiculous. And I was presented with several of them. The other thing is I'm tired too of the things that are going on in the newspaper, trying to demean people's character and who they are, whether they're liberal or conservative. We're a community, and we better start acting like it before it's too late. Thank you.
Before anybody else, Scott wants to come up here. Yeah, Ralph.
So I'm Ralph Mossman. I live in Driggs, and I'm on the city council here. And I think that the businesses that we're bringing in Driggs, we're doing pretty well. We've actually made it easier. We've reduced some of the hoops that they had to jump through, and we've got a bunch of new business coming. And I would just hope that as commissioners, you'll continue to encourage businesses to locate in the cities instead of out in the county.
Ralph, how does that work? Are we doing our job, you know, to get them into you, you know, as far as a shared deal with these area of impacts? Does that work?
Yeah, so far, for sure, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So far, I think it's working pretty good.
And the costs seem to be fine, you know, with people that are coming in the building. Do you see that? Do you see?
Yeah, I think they like being in the city. We're doing some things to encourage them. We've added high-speed fiber optics, and we have the industrial park, and like I said, we've made the laws and the regulations. We're trying to make them easier and easier for people to locate their businesses in the city, and I think it's working. And I'm just asking for your cooperation to help with that.
Is there instances, I am not aware of businesses that have been encouraged or, you know, in the county rather than the cities? Is there some?
No, not that I'm aware of.
And I think we would all support most business to be in the cities.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, and it's like, and I got, how, question, I don't know if this is the right place for it, but.
Sure it is.
No, it's open forum, but anyway, the light ordinance in Driggs, half the lights turned off for a reason, or are they supposed to reflect down? This has been, when my parents passed away last year, our light post by their home was off, and it had been off, and it's like it really was bothersome for me to have that light off because of a lighting issue. Is there a reason that all our lights have to be off, or
Right, thanks for asking that question. If that light is not been replaced, it's because nobody has mentioned it to the city that there's a light out there.
Okay, but it's not something, a mandatory deal that was turned on?
No, not at all. I mean, personally, my thing, I would like to see the lights turned off from midnight till 5 in the morning. I think it's kind of a waste. There's hardly anyone out there, and why are we lighting? So that's kind of my thing, but I don't have support from the other city councilmen, so far we have not turned off any lights.
No concern about theft or anything like that?
No, we have the money to keep them on, and I'm in the minority. I'm the only one who wants to turn the lights off, so you're talking to the right guy, but I can't really help you.
It was a question, and I didn't know if the light bulbs they too much wattage in them.
No, not at all. No, if there's a light that's out, if nobody reports it, it stays out.
293 Harper.
I can't write it. Yeah, if you write it down for me and give it to me, I'll give it to the Public Works, and we'll get it replaced.
All right, thanks. I just...
Being recorded.
Any other questions? That was a good one. Thanks.
Thanks, Ralph. Pete.
Hey, Jen. Pete Moyer, live out in the Tetonvalley area. Ralph, I was wondering, did they back off on the impact fees in the city of Driggs, or?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Great, because that was some of my concerns, because being a builder in the valley here, and I've been here for a long time, I'm kind of concerned about the permitting process and the cost of permits, impact fees, and I realize that they're, entities that feel like they're a necessity. I kind of think they're a double dip myself, but, they have an effect on construction in general, and right now, construction's almost at a standstill. I think they've got a total of 3 permits to date from this year in the county, and 2 of those were old permits that were just renewed. So basically, there's only 1 new residential permit in the valley, and that's not good. And I think the real growth engine here, it used to be agriculture, and then, back when the boom kind of started, actually I've seen probably 3 booms since I've lived here, there always is a bust period, it seems like, and then it comes back. But this one seems different. This one's way deeper than I've ever seen. But with that said, the only way you're going to encourage growth in the construction industry here is that you're going to have to lower the cost. There's got to be some incentive for people to want to build. And I know that, I did some calculations on the city of Driggs' impact, and basically to build a 10,000 square foot retail business, just the impact fee is close to $70,000. And I don't know if people realize that. That kills growth almost immediately.
In the city of Driggs, it's that high?
Yes.
I thought it was capped.
No. It's like 6 something a square foot. It's close to $7 a square foot for retail business.
We don't have control of the city.
But Ralph says that's been.
It hasn't. I don't.
That's been rescinded. But even on top of that, you still have a building permit. It'll probably run you $4,000 or $5,000, and a building that big is probably more. You got hookup fees, water, sewer. That's going to run you another $5,000. And then there's they got several disconnect fees or whatever. But I did some math on just if you wanted to build a 4-plex rental, say 1,500 square feet per unit, a 4-plex, you're looking at $50,000 in fees.
And you're talking about the city.
Yeah.
Because our county.
And the county's not as bad.
Yeah, it's like $1,800, I think.
No, you're $2,000 for the
Okay,
for that, but then you got the building permit, you still have, you know, sewer fees, we just get fees to death. And I'm kind of tired of every time, the entities, the government entities seem to think they need money, they go after construction, you know, and all it does is hurt, you know, hardworking people, carpenters, plumbers, heating, electrical. You know, there's a lot of, you know, people in the valley that, you know, have worked in this industry a long time, and a lot of them have left. Most of them, you know, have probably gone to, I've had a lot of subs go to North Dakota because there's no work here. Many people go to Jackson because that's the only place there's work right now. And, you know, and unless this changes, and I think the more regulations, and I mean, I don't want to get on, you know, dumping on the comprehensive plan, but I think that could have been handled totally different. I think you could have at least gone back and tweaked the old one and, you know, made some changes without spending a lot of money on a new plan. And then at some point, you know, when growth comes back and you get you know, some economic upturn, then go back and review it and move forward. But right now, I just don't think it's the time to, you know, shove more regulations down people's throats, and you know, which is, I mean, we'll eat it, but there's a point where it just breaks the back of the people that are paying the taxes. And I've seen, since I moved here in, you know, I moved here in '74. Actually, I served on the first planning and zoning committee, and you know, it wasn't, you know, the comprehensive plan wasn't well accepted back then, and I don't think they're ever going to be well accepted. People will eat it, but it was mandated by the state. So there's really nothing you can do about it. You still have to have one in place. Doesn't say how much you have to have in place, but I mean, that's up to the powers that be. But what I've seen over the years is the powers that be, it doesn't matter who you put in office. I don't care if it's a Democrat, Republican, they still do what they want. You know, I mean, you can make all the zoning and ordinances in the world, but they still do what they want. And I don't care if they're all Democrats or they're all Republicans, because I've seen it happen. You know, and I've seen things that you wouldn't think would get passed, you know, in planning and zoning. I mean, it amazed me. But that's just human nature, and that's what, you know, what's going to happen. And, you know, I guess with that said, I thank you guys for listening, and you know, thanks for serving.
Pete, question, how long a process is it for you to get a permit through the county?
It's way easy here. I mean, it doesn't take, you know, I mean, you can have a permit in a week. I mean, it's not that complicated. It's not like it is in Jackson, 3 or 4 months. But no, you know, and that's not really a toughie. It's just the cost.
Do you work a lot over in Jackson?
Only when I really have to. Because I really don't like making the drive, although I will work over there. I mean, I worked over there about a year ago. So.
And their building permits, I mean, they didn't take as big a dip as we did they?
Overall, their permits are probably in the same line of cost as they are here.
So, I mean,
but what makes theirs way more expensive is they have a low-income housing permit that you have to purchase. If it gets over a certain amount of square footage, you have to, which is really expensive. And basically, they subsidize low-income housing over there. So.
But their building permits have picked up quite a bit.
Yes, quite a bit. Yeah. They're busy over there. But then again, I think that goes back to what Tony Go was saying. I think all the QE spending has had a big effect on you know, the stock market and bankers in general, and they're the ones that are actually making a lot of money off a lot of the QE spending that's going on. It isn't trickling down like it was intended. It's basically, you know, the wealthier getting wealthier. So that's how I see that.
We made it attractive for them to live over here.
Well, we have a sign. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Pete. Gentlemen, way back. Oh,
Rusty Cheney, live in Driggs. And I think Tony Go made an excellent point. I think that what investors want to see is stability. If someone's going to spend money, they want to know that what they're buying is what they're going to get, and it's going to have a good chance of staying that way. And I think for all of the controversy surrounding the comp plan, I think there was a very loud and clear message about what the core values of the valley are. And I think people who wear cowboy hats and people who wear bike helmets can agree on a good, solid group of those values. And I think that a lot of our investors, that's what they're looking for. You mentioned City Pass and how the things that matter to them, you know, they could have their business anywhere. It's a business that's on the internet. They could be based out of Haines, Alaska, or New York City, and it wouldn't matter. But they chose Teton Valley for the reasons Kathy mentioned, in terms of the community, its rural character, and the values that we can all share and that we want to protect. And so I ask you, when it comes time to implement the comp plan, what are you going to do to send a message to the community and potential investors and potential businesses coming in that this is a stable place, that the values that you see written on the wall here aren't going to be in jeopardy? And how are you going to provide for that protection moving forward? Got my next thought. But that's the main question I have. That'll come to when I sit back down. Thank you.
You guys can answer that? I want to hear the answer. Mr. Becker.
Good evening. My name is Bill Beckett. My wife and I are the principal owners of Grand Teton Park. Let me tell you about my experience in the county and how we got where we are today, because there may be some thought process about several years, and we're coming back from Idaho Falls one day, thinking about what could we do with this 3.5 acres of land. So we passed through these potato fields and said, look, this is Idaho with